All right, my friends, welcome to the 16th video of this uh, complete CSS tutorial series course. And in our last section, we talked about Flexbox. We defined what Flexbox is. And in this section, we'll be talking about all or all the properties of Flexbox and what they do, all the major properties of Flexbox and what they do. Alright, guys, my friend, let's get right into it. Alright, my friends, we are just going to take out all these styles and then restyle again. So we have this div with a class of container, and then children inside that div we have box 1, box 2, box 3, which are the classes, and they will also give them a general class of bx, 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 and then these are the difference between them. All right, from our note here, we treat in our last of say what is Flexbox and what they do, but we are going to be starting from in this class Flexbox properties and what they do. All right, we say number one, container properties applied on the parent element. So when you display an element flex, for instance, if you display this parent element flex, this parent element itself becomes a container of flex property, while the children become an a flex item. If that is correct, so we are just going to say dot container container and then display flex. So when you say display flex, this is what it means. It enables Flexbox on the container. So by default, when you say display flex, all the children are aligned horizontally. All the children are aligned horizontally. Let's just give the children a wall, give them a border of say 2 pixels, solid gray. So because we have this, they also give the parents a border of say 2 pixels, solid red. So you see how it is showing on our browser. So because we've displayed the parent, because we've said the parent is a flex container and it affects the children to be a flex item, we can do something like, say, if we want to put spaces between the children, instead of us using a margin, on the children to set top and bottom. Let's say the top and bottom want it to be 0 because we don't want it to apply there, but we want spaces between each container inside the parent. So we could say 12 pixels, and then we see spaces inside the container. But the parent is already a flex container, so we don't need to do this except if it is necessary for us. So what we need to do is to use a property called gap, and that will automatically put spaces between the container. But this is the difference. Remember, look at this margin now that we say this first 0 starts from the top and bottom 0, which is no margin should apply to it, but the left and right should be 12 pixels. If you look at it, the 12 pixels was applied to this side of the element and also to this side, then this side plus this side. You can see the spaces here is more larger than the spaces here because at this point there is no other element here, so it was only 12 pixels that was added here. But at this point it is 24 pixels that was added because the 12 pixels from this container and the 12 pixels from this container making this space 24 pixels. That is why the space is actually larger than this space here. So we can fix that. Since it is a flex box, we can fix that by just setting gap in the parent that will affect the children. We can say gap 12 pixels. And look at what happened. It gave you the exact 12 pixels between each boxes, but there is nothing applied at the edge because there is no other element there. So it gives you the exact pixels within each boxes. You can see how flex container makes it easy. Instead of you to be adding extra spaces, it makes it easy for you for your stuff to be aligned. So the next property we want to look at is flex direction. What does this flex direction do? By default, flex direction, it is set to rule, say define the main axis. Yes, the flex direction defined the main axis, and by default it is set to row. Row means horizontal. By default, it is horizontal. Items placed left to right, which we are seeing here, from left to right. Items are placed from left to right. So that is by default. So if we say flex direction, by default, it is set to row. So items are placed from left to right, and because they are placed from left to right by default, this is called the main axis. If we can change this row to be column, and then this will now be displayed from top to bottom instead of from left to right. But by default, it is set to row. All right, we'll look at the next property now. Now, well, the next property that we have on Flex is called row reverse. Row reverse. Now, when you reverse a row, it is from right to left instead of from left to right. So, what happened if we say Flex direction row reverse? What will happen here? You can see that it started from the right to the left. From the right to the left. Now, it is when you say row reverse, the items comes to the right and to the left. So the body boxes, the elements are also, their positions are also flipped, because see that box 1 started from here, box 2, box 3, box 4. But when you say, but in the other way around, it was 1, 2, 3, 4. But now we're having 1, 2, 3, 4 from the right. That is what the row reverse property does, in case you want it that way. These things are very useful when creating navigation bars. They are very useful, or when creating your UI, how they are placed. Let's look at the next property. The next value of flex direction. All these are properties of flex direction. The next property of flex direction, like we have said, it is called column. So like we said, by default, it is set to row, but we can set the flex direction to be column, and then it will be from top to bottom, from top to bottom. And then as well, we can also reverse the column. Instead of from top to bottom, it can be from bottom to top. So this, if we change here, let's just comment on it. If we change here, to column reverse, you can see that it starts from the bottom, box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4. It starts from the bottom down to the top. So that is what these properties, that is what this flex direction property do. Remember, the flex direction property is applied to the children in the flex parent, not to the flex parent itself, but to the children. Even the gap is applied to the children. The flex direction is applied to the children. Please note that. Okay, let me give a note here. So 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 all these properties are applied to the flex children. They apply to the flex items children, which these are the children. All right, let's look at the next property. The next property, we have flex wrap. We have flex wrap. What does this flex wrap now? Flex wrap controls wrapping of flex items. By default, it is set to no wrap. Okay, let's go practically. So let's just comment on this. So let's add more boxes. For instance, let's add more boxes. How about a couple of them? So you can see that the more boxes I add, the more shrink this element inside this parent are. If I add more boxes, it becomes shrink. If I add more boxes, it becomes shrink and there is no space. You can see. So by default, it is set to no wrap. That means do not wrap. But if we say, we can change that. We can say flex wrap, flex hyphen wrap, we can say wrap. So when we say wrap, it will automatically wrap and then keep the initial width and height of each flex items inside the parent. So but by default it is set to no wrap. This is it by default. By default it is set to no wrap. So, but we don't want this thing not to be no wrap, but what? Wrap. So if you say wrap, it will then wrap. Sorry, not hyphen no wrap. It is no wrap altogether. No wrap by default. It is no wrap. So we can change the dimension. Instead of no wrap, we can say the element should wrap. Now you may wonder that I have flex wrap and flex wrap, and the first one I say no wrap, and the second one I said wrap. What is going to happen to the browser? Which is it going to obey? The thing of the matter, the browser will only obey the last one. So if this one come last, that is what it will obey, because this one will override the next one. This last statement will override this statement. If this one comes first, then it will override this one. Let's give it a test. If I swap their position, you see now, it will be no wrap because this come last and it overrides this one. So don't get confused with you using this statement. If the properties are the same, the last value will override the first value. Hope you get that clear. All right, let's move to the next property that we have. The next property we have is wrap reverse. Wrap reverse, wrap but in a reversed order. So this thing is wrapped, but we can also reverse how it is wrapped. How do we do that? We can say flex wrap wrap reverse. So we can take this one. So we say wrap reverse. Look at just what happened. Let me take it back to how it was, and then so you can see for yourself. You can see this is wrap. We have from left to right, box one, box two. But when you say a reverse, what happened? It's reversed, which means it starts from what? From right to left. From right to left. And then you see where we have this, we start from right to left, and then the element inside the parent also changed their position, which we have box 4, box 4, box 4, and then all the way down. So this is how the wrapping is done. Let's look at the next property. The next property we have flex flow, shorthand for flex direction plus flex wrap. So instead of us to say flex wrap or flex direction, we can just say flex flex flow. So we can put two values there instead of just passing one value. How does this thing actually work? Let me comment on this and then say flex flow. We can say should this should wrap, and this should also this should be in a row, and then it should wrap. So you can see that this is in a row and then it is wrapping as well. We can say it should be in a column and then it should wrap as well. So we can use something like this. You can set it to the column or you can set it to the row. But if you set it to column, there is no need for wrapping because you will not even notice because it has more spaces to play with. So it is better you say row because there will be no more room to scroll down horizontally, then you want it to wrap. That is what that property of flex does. So now we have the next property, which is called justify content and then place content. These two do the same thing. They do the same thing. What are their work? They align items along the main axis. They align items along the main axis. Like I told you from the last class, the main axis can flip. It can flip either horizontally or vertically. How do we know this? Let me take all these off. How do we know this? Now, when we say when we say display flex, like I told you, by default it is the direction is set to row, so that is why this thing is in a row format. So but because it is a row, because it is in row, we did not change the direction. This becomes the main axis. This become the main axis. So if we say place items center, what will happen? It will center these items in at the middle of this main axis. For instance, for that to be clear enough, let's just say we take out all these elements so we have enough room for here to play with. So if we say place place contents center, all these things comes to the center of the page. Or instead of, either you do this or you say justify content center. Say justify content center, it will still work the same way. Either you say place content center or justify content center. It align the items across the main axis at the center of the parent element. All right then, my friends, and if the direction was changed, is going to do the opposite. What do I mean by this? For instance, let's say we say display flex and then we change the direction. We say flex direction and we change it to column, and we change it to column. So you can see that this, if we say justify content center, what will happen is going to move the content from wherever it from top to the middle of the container. This time around, not horizontally, but vertically. But why is it not visible at this moment? Because this container does not actually have an initial height. It is just the height that it has is called a fit content height, which means whatever thing you put into the container, it automatically take the height of that content, so it does not have a defined height. But if we want this thing to be visible, if we say if we give it an height of say 300 pixels, and then you see that these things are actually placed at the center of the parent container. I hope this is clear. So the next property that we'll move into is the next value we'll move into is space around. We've talked about center, we always use center, flex end, and space between. What are all these things doing? So for instance, let's take this thing back to row. Let's comment on it. It should be back to row. And then let's take out this out of the game. The height, let's take the height away. So we have this thing back. So justify content or place content as different value apart from centering the elements. So other value we can use, we can say space between. When you say space between, it will automatically set spaces between each element. Spaces between each element, just like this. But this is how the spaces work. It's going to put one at the end of the left side at one, and also the other one at the end of the right side, and then distributes equal spaces around them. But take note of this one at the end of the right side and this one at the end of the left side. What are the other values that space between has? It also have space around. What does space around does? It gives a space at the left hand side and also at the right hand side, and double the space between each element. So this space is doubled here, is doubled here, and also here, but half at this side, half at this side. That is what this value does. So not just by putting it at the center. All right, the other value that it has is space evenly. Space evenly. When you say space evenly, so what does space evenly does? It's going to keep equal spaces on each element. The space here is equal to the space here, is equal to the space here, is equal to the space here, is equal to the space here. That is what this value does. Space evenly on the items. Remember, all these properties are applied to the they are being affected by the children of the parent container, but they are being written in the parent container styles. So this is what this one does. The video is getting too long, which I don't want it to get too long. So we will continue. We'll have this course to be part 2, so we can look at other properties that this thing does. All right, thank you, and see you in the part 2 section of the same video.